We want to talk a little bit about ABWE. I want you to know that today there's going to be a lot of content, and you're going to experience a lot of different people bringing, I think, very good perspective to you about who we are as a mission agency, about what we hope to do. And one of the things that I think is critically important as you look at your first steps in mission is for you to understand the relationship between your church, you, and any partner that you would partner with as a sending agency. And any risky frontline person who's going to go out and do something cross-culturally needs people holding the rope on the back end. And we desire to be that. So I'm going to take a few moments this morning, and just as we get started, I want to talk just very basically about who we are as a mission, why we exist, and what we hope to do. One of our executive directors uses this phrase a lot. He talks about, I want to be a cards on the table kind of guy. You know, in other words, instead of playing a card game and holding your cards like this, like I have to do when I'm playing cards with my wife, you know, and I'm like, don't look at my cards, you know, I'm not looking at your cards. Oh, you know, and I'd have to hold them like that. No, I would never have to do that. But we want to be cards on the table kind of guy. Like we're playing our hand in the open, and so you understanding who we are and what we want to be is important to us. And so let me just first talk about why ABWE exists. And we really exist for two reasons and two reasons alone, and that is Jesus Christ and the Great Commission. You know, if you have your Bibles, turn with me to Matthew chapter 28, to the Great Commission, because that's a key verse. And I'm sure you've heard many sermons on the Great Commission. But the Great Commission begins with a statement of authority. Before it goes into what we're told to do, Jesus' authority is established in the Great Commission. And Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me, right? And the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we believe, is the center point of history. I get asked this question a lot, and maybe you've thought about this in missions. Like, so what do you do? Like, would you send a missionary in a country where it's illegal to make a disciple of Jesus Christ? Like, would ABWE break a law and like actually do that? Like, as a Christian, would you break the law and go to a country? And I will tell you this, I will neither confirm nor deny that we do that. But if we were to do that, we would do that based upon biblical authority. Earthly authority is wonderful and good, but you know what? My authority is my parents, but my authority is also police officers and human government. And then above human government, there is God's authority, right? And if the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords gives me a command, I must obey. And so this statement of authority is critical. It's critical in even how you work out your ethics of missions, right? And so we can't skip that. So ABWE exists because we believe that there is a king and that he has dominion and that he rules and that he has given us a command. And this command is the second reason we exist, which is the Great Commission. And guys, listen, this is important. This is foundational stuff. You need to understand, because we do what we do because of Jesus and who he is. And we do what we do because of what he has told us to do. Specifically, to make disciples. The main verb in the Great Commission is to make disciples. Often when I go to churches and I talk about the Great Commission, I'll be like, what's the main verb in the Great Commission? You've seen it, go make disciples of all nations. You know, a lot of well-meaning people was like, the main verb is go, right? It's first word in the sentence. Main verb, go. That's not it. It's make disciples. Go is how you make disciples. It's actually a participle in the sentence. Now we're getting grammatical here. I'm sorry, it's way too early for grammar, okay? But it's actually, it's one of the means or one of the ways that we make disciples is by going. Another one is baptizing. Another one is teaching. And so we exist because God is who He is, and He has the authority that He has, and He's commanded us to make disciples of all nations. Baptizing them, and going, and teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. And so that's why, in a nutshell, we exist. There's also some history to this. In 1927, a man by the name of Dr. Raphael Thomas was a missionary doctor in the Philippines. And one of the things that he was doing after he would do his rounds and his work in the hospital is that he ran a college ministry in the Philippines. And his college ministry began seeing tremendous fruit. And dozens and dozens of college-age Filipinos were getting saved and were coming to his Bible study. And then dozens turned into hundreds, and then 300, 400, 500 people were coming to his college-age Bible study. And so he began neglecting some of his medical duties in order to be able to do his gospel work that he was doing. And he got a letter from his mission agency telling him to cease and desist from his evangelism and discipleship so that he could get back to his rounds. And it was that interaction that caused Dr. Thomas to say, you know what, I need a new type of partner, a new type of mission agency. A mission agency that sees the need for medical, but doesn't see medical as the ends in its own, that the purpose of even medical missions is not necessarily physical healing, although that's an important component, but spiritual healing. And that the gospel must be center focused. That the person and work of Jesus Christ and the command that He has given us to go and make disciples of all nations are the primary reasons that we go. And so we have become ABWE, and this is 93 years later. You're here today really because a man decided that medical missions was important, but it has to be done gospel first, medical second. Not medical first, gospel second. And so we have many platforms today. You fast forward today, we have all kinds of medical opportunities. So if you're medical here today, we've got all kinds of medical opportunities for you. But they're gospel first, medical second. If you're a teacher here today, we've got schools and seminaries and opportunities for you to teach. If you're a carpenter here today, we've got opportunities for you to do carpentry. But the gospel comes first, and the platform for that gospel comes second. So that's why we exist. We also believe if we exist, there's 5 tasks that we have to do well. Okay? And you can hold us accountable for these. I get a little nervous sharing these with you because once you know these, now you can hold us accountable, right? But if we're going to be cards on the table kind of people, okay, if we do one of these poorly, you'll know, okay? First task is this, is we want to help people discover and nurture their callings. We want to assist individuals and local churches to discover and nurture the calling of men and women of God into missions. And that's part of this event and part of other events and us going to churches and we believe as a mission agent, it's our job to help the local church do that. Some churches do it better than others. Some do it incredible, and we want to partner with them as God calls individuals. Secondly, we want to cooperate with local churches to equip and train individuals to successfully fulfill their calling to mission. So as we discover people and as we help churches discover people who are called to missions, we feel it's our responsibility to equip and train them. So we have many classes, and by the way, there are classes that you can take that you don't have to be an ABWE missionary that you could take. We have classes like essential mission component classes. We have good soil evangelism and discipleship classes that we have. And if you go online, you can see many of the trainings that we have. And you don't have to be an ABWE missionary to take a lot of that training. And the reason is because we believe it's our job to equip and train people that God is calling into missions. And we do that inside our mission, but we also do that outside of our mission. Thirdly, we want to provide churches and missionaries with resources and ministry platforms from which they can obediently pursue their calling to missions. And the idea is this, is there are things that we can do together better than we could do just individually as an individual missionary. We have multiple hospitals around the globe. And doing a hospital ministry, that would be very difficult for one individual missionary. I'm going to pull off a world-class hospital, one individual. A team of people with a team back in the States that can help with fundraising and can help with personnel issues and HR issues and how do we work with the legal system? And oh, by the way, every country has its own legal system and permitting and all of these things that go into running a large organization, partnering together to create that platform where many missionaries now can work together. And by the way, not just in medical work, but in church planting. It's interesting that where we do have hospitals, we have whole movements of church planting because we have been able to see people come to faith in Christ and be discipled at hospitals, and then we've been able to plant churches with them. And now in several of our regions, we work alongside national partners, and we don't even do the church planting anymore. We're working with them as they begin church planting because they have matured so much. So we want to build these platforms and help these platforms to exist. We also want to make sure that people have the resources. What you see here, this room, is just one small aspect, and I would say probably the least important room in this building. There's a second floor on this building. And in that second floor, there are amazing people who come to work every day, and you know what they do? They crunch numbers for missionaries. Like, they take a check that got mailed from your grandma, and they take that check and they make sure your grandma gets an IRS receipt and that check goes to a ministry account and that you can get access to that money when you're in a foreign country and you can and they're doing all that, and it's a little bit invisible, but it's so helpful to have the resources behind you to make sure that your finances are handled with integrity. That you're not going to lose money, or that you're not going to have some donor that you've worked hard to engage in your ministry and to somehow have their checks messed up. So we see that task as important. Fourthly, we want to help sending and supporting churches care for and champion missionaries. So once we help churches and individuals discover and we have ministry platforms, we do all that, we want to care long-term and champion missions. In other words, we want to have an organization that helps individual missionaries have contacts and have the care that they need. So we have a growing member care team that you should ask a little bit about anyone that you talk to about a member care team. We've got a growing team that comes alongside people because, listen, marriage in the best of cases can be difficult at times. Singleness, in the best of cases, can be difficult sometimes. And it's important to have people to talk to and resources there for us when we go through those difficult times. And so we want to provide that. Fifthly, we want to honor our missionaries by providing lifelong guidance and retirement preparation. If I can give you one of the burdens I had, I was a pastor for almost 30 years before I came with ABWE. We supported many missionaries. One of the heartbreaks that I had as a pastor and that our church's missions teams had was this, is we would have amazing missionaries and they would turn 70 or 71 or whatever, then they would decide, I need to retire. And they would come back off the field and they had nothing. And I would scratch my head and I would think, wait a minute, did you not? And they're just like, I lived by faith my whole life and I'm going to live by faith now. And then I would have people in my church saying, wait a minute, live by faith, but well, how are they going to afford an apartment? Are we going to pay for that now? And it wasn't that we didn't love them, we did love them. And it was because that we were loved, we were in pain for them. And we're like, how do we care? And so 70 and 80 and 90 years old, and they haven't been in missions in 30 years, and we're still supporting them as a church. And our team, our missions team, would struggle with that. And listen, one of the things that we do here at ABWE, and just it's more difficult on the front end, and sometimes we get, I have to fundraise for my retirement. Yes, you do. So we won't put a church and a missions committee in the horrible place 30, 40, 50 years from now saying, do we continue supporting this missionary that we love, who's not doing any ministry anymore, or have we been all the time funding them so when they come home and they need to retire, they're going to have the care and the support and the nest egg that they need to be able to care for themselves. And so we want to, as a mission agency, have people begin with the end in mind a little bit, right? So that we have retirement preparation and long-term guidance. So these are essential tasks. And these are the things that we believe as a mission agency, kind of a nuts and bolts level that we feel like we need to be doing. And I've been sharing a lot, but again, I'm trying to help you get a picture of what our vision and what we see as our tasks and our roles in your life and in individuals' lives. And I do want to take a moment to talk about our vision statement. And you'll see this vision statement, and it does need a little unpacking because there's a lot in that mission statement. There's one word in there that you see multiple times, and what word is that? The hint was the word multiple. And it shows up once, but it's referring to 3 or 4 things. The word multiply, okay, wasn't a trick. Multiplying leaders, and if you look at multiplying churches, multiplying missions movements. Our vision is to do what we think is the best thing that a church or an individual can do, and that is reproduce. Every healthy organism reproduces, right? Whether it's in biology or in spiritual life. When do you know that you are discipled? When you can make a disciple. You're not discipled when you have all the facts. You're discipled when you can make a disciple and recreate a disciple. And so at ABWE, we believe that our vision is to fulfill the Great Commission with this idea that we help individuals, and we call them leaders because, again, we believe a fully discipled and evangelized person will lead others in evangelism and discipleship, right? So we want to multiply individuals. So we believe going into all the world and proclaiming the gospel in such a way that someone would come to faith in Jesus Christ and to disciple them and to teach them all things, like the Great Commission says, so that they can then in turn take that Great Commission and the person and work of Jesus Christ and recreate that in another person. That's multiplying leaders. And then we believe we need to multiply churches. So we talk about gathering those individuals who are discipling one another and growing, and we gather them together in local bodies of believers called churches that the Scriptures have given so much teaching about. And we want to form ecclesiastical bodies, called out people who gather together for mutual worship and encouragement and using one another's spiritual gifts on one another. So we plant these churches. And then, again, just like we would want fully formed disciples to reproduce, when is a church fully functioning? When that church reproduces. Can I say this? What we don't want to do as a mission is export American Christianity that has a church that just exists in a community, and a pastor comes in and spends 30 years there and retires, and another pastor comes in and spends 30 years, and another pastor comes in, and that cultural Christianity where a church is just kind of a building on a corner that has some people attending. We believe, again, that churches must be organic. They're bodies of believers who are multiplying themselves. And so naturally, a church would want to be multiplying as individuals are multiplying. And then we as a mission agency believe that we would not be a fully formed, fully discipled mission agency unless we were multiplying. And so what we want to do is gather those churches together and build networks of churches that would, again, multiply ourselves so that ABWE is just one mission agency. But you know what? There are mission agencies now all over the world that are from churches that have been planted by ABWE missionaries and national partners. Why? Because we want to multiply ourselves in local churches. And so if you go to the Philippines today, there are actually multiple Filipino mission agencies that have been formed out of churches that were influenced through ABWE, and now they're sending Filipino missionaries to places that we could never go. And there are mission agencies in Thailand, and there are mission agencies in Brazil that are sending believers and that we're working with and partnering with, multiplying ourselves. That's our vision. Our vision is that we would multiply leaders, churches, and missions movements. And the last thing that I want to talk about here, and I'm going to be done, so you're going to lose me as a talking head, and that'll be a good thing for you. I want to talk to you a little bit about the culture of ABWE. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. You can have a great strategy and a great mission, a great vision. You can know your tasks, and you can work in an organization that has a bad culture. Have you ever experienced that? And by culture, I'm talking about the things that we hold communally dear. The things that Peter Drucker, who is a kind of a management guru, he said this. He said, culture eats strategy for lunch, or breakfast. I think he said breakfast, but you could do lunch. You know, he was kind of like trash talking strategy. And I think strategy is important, that we know what we're here to do, that we have a vision for what we're here to do, that we have a clear mission and vision. Those things are critical, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. In other words, culture is more important. And there are, very quickly, I'm going to go through them. There are 5 cultural things, and again, as I share them to you, you can hold us accountable for them. This is the kind of culture that we're trying to create. The first one is this. The first cultural value is this, is we want Jesus Christ to get first place. I hope you felt that here the last few hours. That Jesus Christ is not an addendum to what we're trying to do here, that we're not, and I'm not bad-mouthing anybody, but let me just say this. We're not social justice warriors who also love Jesus. We are Jesus people who do social justice. Again, I hope you feel the order here. The person and work of Jesus Christ is foremost. And we want Jesus to get first place in everything that we do. We want to submit to Him. We are underneath His authority. We don't want to step out from His authority. We want to obey Him and follow Him. And if we get in trouble for our doing well, if we get in trouble for obeying Jesus, or because we're in a country that is illegal to do something, we want to do it because we obeyed and we served Jesus Christ. And so that value is critical for us. So we want to worship Jesus first. He is the Alpha and the what class? Omega, right? He's the first and the last in everything that we do. The second value is this, we want to have the gospel be celebrated here. There's a popular phrase, right? You've heard this. How many of you have heard of like a gospel-centered church, right? Or gospel saturated, and there's lots of words, and I totally get that. But I can tell you, I've seen and been a part of churches and groups of people that were gospel centered, but they've also kind of gotten over the gospel. We want to celebrate the gospel. I never want us to lose that sense that we were once aliens and strangers, separated from God without hope until the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I believe that as we never get over that sense of we were lost and now we were found, and we hold the gospel in high esteem and celebrate the gospel, I believe that it will become a city on a hill. It will become salt that hasn't lost its savor. And the nations will see it and be glad. And so we want to celebrate the gospel in everything that we do. Again, the message of the gospel is not a second tier to a hospital or a second. It's a primary motivation and driving force. The celebrating of the gospel. It's good news. It means, literally the word means good news, right? And so why would we as believers not celebrate the good news? And as we are ambassadors, we're not ambassadors to, and you should believe in Jesus too. I'm not ambassadors of that message. I'm ambassadors that you can be made right with the sovereign God. You can be reunited. You can have purpose in your life. There's a reason why you're on this planet walking around right now. And that reason is Jesus. And here's how you reunite through Him to the Father. And so we want to celebrate that. So celebrating the gospel is absolutely critical. The third thing is this. Once you get into missions, you'll realize that it is different than any other lifestyle you could participate in. I was a pastor for 30 years. I've only been engaged in missions. I mean, we did tons of missions. I wouldn't be a president of a mission agency if we didn't engage in missions. But I've never been a full-time missionary. I've never had the privilege of being called into missions. But I've been living with missionaries for the last 2.5 years. And let me tell you, it's different. It's different. I'm not going to say weird. I didn't say that word. You thought that word. I didn't think that. It's different. We live with one another. We travel with one another. In the last 2.5 years, I've gotten to know missionaries and some way better than I wanted to get to know them. I'm just saying it, right? And we're not going to be able to go into all the world, into these different cultures and places, and some of them very difficult, some of them very, very much like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, but some of them very difficult. We're not going to be able to do that unless we work on what we call a biblical family atmosphere. And what I mean by that is living the one another commands out as we serve as teams. That means that we honor one another above ourselves. We prefer one another above ourselves. We teach one another. We admonish one another. We bear one another's burdens. We love one another. All of the one another commands of Christ that He has given us, we have to put into play. We have no choice, because we're like, when you're 26 hours on a plane, traveling around in an airport, and you smell that way, and you're closely scrunched next to a person, you better love that person. You better prefer them above yourselves. You better bear their burdens. Come alongside of them and encourage them when they're down. Build them up in like precious faith. Man, when you're serving, we have to have that. And so that's a cultural value we're trying to instill. Make sure that we talk about that and that we do that for one another. Here's the fourth one. And Jesus is the perfect example of this. It's a combination of words that may not make sense together, but I think you'll catch it in just a second. It's humble confidence. In other words, a missionary has to be this perfect mixture of crickets chirping and, no. We believe as an organization, our culture has to be a perfect mixture of humility, where we're willing to serve one another, that there's no job that we're unwilling to tackle, that there's no place that we're unwilling to go, there's no task that we're unwilling to do. Why? Because we're humble servants of Jesus Christ. Like our master, we're willing to take off the loincloth, get on our knees, and wash the feet of our coworkers and national partners. We have that level of humility. But we also have to have this confidence or this boldness to be able to go and preach the gospel in difficult places. We have to have the confidence to go to places where, listen, if they find out really why you're there and what you're doing, you will be killed. And if you're not confident in Jesus Christ, if you're not confident in your mission, and you understand deeply the person of Jesus Christ, His authority in your life, and the Great Commission, what you've been created to do, if you don't have those things down, you're not going to have that confidence that you will need to be bold in a time of hardship. And so we want to create this culture that, we're not afraid to get on our knees and serve, but we're also not afraid to be bold and proclaim the gospel in a difficult place, or to confront a fellow believer in sin. We want to have a humble confidence. The last thing is, we believe this, and I'm sure you believe this to be true. We believe that our lives and our possessions have been given to us for sharing. We believe that there's nothing that we have at ABWE that we've not been given. Think about that. There's nothing that ABWE as a mission agency has that we have not been given. It's all been given to us. And so we want to be like our hands wide open. We're not trying to get and hold on to. We want to be open-handed and give it all away. I told you that we've got hospitals all around the world. What I haven't told you is that there are 4 hospitals in the Philippines that ABWE does not own or run or manage or really have, we don't have any missionaries at. Those 4 hospitals were started by ABWE. They discipled and trained Filipino doctors and nurses and gospel workers. And those 4 hospitals all around the Philippines exist today. They're still presenting the gospel. They're still Christian hospitals that do evangelism and discipleship. And you know what? ABWE is, we don't own them. They're not ours. They're our Filipino brothers and sisters. It wasn't our job to run and manage that for the rest of eternity. It was our job to multiply leaders, churches, and missions movements, and allow the people that God has raised up and trained in those nations to run and use those hospitals and churches and missions agencies. And so we don't want to hold on to our stuff. It's here to be used. When I was a youth pastor, I was given a brand new guitar. I was super excited about it because I was a cool, hip youth pastor, and I had a cool, hip guitar now, like kind of like Noah did, And I thought I was all that, and so I got my new guitar, and a teenager, very first week I got that guitar, said, "Hey, can I play it?" And I was like, "Great, yeah, sure, you can play it. It's cool and it's hip, and he played that guitar, and he put the strap on wrong, and the guitar came off the strap, and it hit the amp and put a huge gash in the bottom of the guitar. And that very expensive, cool, hip guitar, to this day, has a big hole in the bottom of that guitar. At that moment, it's very tempting to think, I'm not going to use my stuff for ministry anymore. It's my guitar. You let teenagers touch it, you know what they do? They put big holes in it. That's what they do. Every time, by the way. Or you can think, you know what? That guitar was just a tool for ministry, and it's meant to be used up. Because our lives and our possessions are meant for sharing with a world who needs Jesus Christ. So that's what I wanted to share with you this morning. Why we exist, our mission and our vision, the tasks that we want to accomplish, and the culture that we're trying to create at ABWE. And if those things resonate with you, then as you think about missions and as you consider your next steps, ABWE might be a great fit for you as a partner in ministry. If those things don't resonate with you, we probably aren't a good fit. And you know what? We're okay with both sides of that equation, okay? Because we're not meant for everyone. We know that we're not meant for everyone. We're trying to be who we believe God wants us to be, and to do that as best as we can.